What is happening out there, rotoscouts basketball fans? Might be the last time all season I have to use the word basketball in that sentence. Start out the show the same way every day. But I am sick and tired of covering basketball at this point. And today we've got like a before he leaves, let's break him in half kind of a slate lined up. 10 games on both sites. Everything in action before, 8 o'clock? Yep, everything from 7 to 8 o'clock. 10 games lined up. It is going to be a mess. It is going to be a disaster. It is not going to be fun for at least one of us to be covering tonight. That one is this guy. But we're going to be on top of things as usual. We'll get everything updated as changes come through. We have a ton of players who are already out. We have a bunch of players who are currently questionable. Not that many probables. Odd little twist. But boy, as we've been talking about all week long, am I ready for baseball. Baseball kicking off tomorrow. We've already got 2 postponements of baseball. A couple of rainouts already. Brewers and the Mets rained out. And the Phillies and the Braves game is rained out as well. So no Ronnie Acuna, no Spencer Strider. A couple of big pieces coming off the board there. Nobody gets to play Jackson Churio tomorrow in his MLB debut. We'll have to wait for Friday for those things. Hopefully Friday. Hopefully the weather improves. It's not too bad yet, but I do hear it's going to rain all of tonight and tomorrow here in the New York, Philadelphia, and whatnot area. So we'll deal with all that. But baseball-wise, what you guys can expect. I'm expecting to go live with the show tomorrow morning. Figure around 11 a.m. That's kind of like the loose start time I've got in my head. FanDuel starts up at 3 o'clock. DraftKings starts up at 4 o'clock. Going to try and knock out an article overnight tonight. It probably won't be the crazy, that long. I'm going to get both my hands on the screen here, that crazy much text about every single game. I might go a little bit lighter touch just to get through it, but we'll see. Every time I say that, I end up spending 4 hours and going as deep as possible on every game. You guys know how it is. But I'm going to try and knock that out overnight tonight. And then by morning, you guys will have projections up on the site, just like for the Soul Series. That's going to include player projection for DraftKings and FanDuel. It's going to include the custom home run mark for every single player on the slate, or everybody in the projected lineups to start the day anyway. I'll also do the home run picks where I just pick a guy from every team, and then I have my one overall home run pick for the day. We'll have the power index where it shows the best home run hitting team opportunities. We'll have individual pitcher projections. Not sure if I'm going to include strikeout projections. Maybe not to start the season. I just want to make sure that we're dialed in. But that'll probably land on there at some point. But you'll have all those different pieces for tomorrow. And I am ready to rock and roll baseball-wise. But we have an ugly basketball slate to talk about first. Cujo Blues in the house. I'm doing pretty well, Cujo. Just kind of a DFS-oriented day for me. This is, I keep threatening it and saying it's going to be the last basketball show, and I'm mostly joking, but I'm not sure exactly how they're all going to fit in, especially as baseball gets into, 7:05 start times against 7 o'clock locks. Fortunately, it's only a couple of weeks. Playoff basketball, we're not going to have shows. I will try my best to do playoff projections for NBA, but I will try and at least, here and there over the next couple of weeks, knock out basketball shows where possible. But tomorrow, I'm not sure. We'll see. But projections will be up for basketball the rest of the way. And here's what we're dealing with today. I'm with you, Cujo. Just waiting on tomorrow, buddy. Kenneth Woodhouse is here. Bird Nerd's here. What's going on, guys? Good to see everybody. So let's dig into this thing. Like I said, 10 games, all between 7 and 8 o'clock. It's going to be a fun one. I do normally, every time we get this type of slate with everything happening in about an hour, I usually say, oh man, I really love the sprint slates. They're a lot of fun. This is going to be a problem in terms of just updating things in a timely fashion as things change. It gets a little bit sticky, but we'll deal. Starting off at the top of the Vegas board, Cleveland at Charlotte. We also got a bunch of just ugly games. Cleveland at Charlotte. Cleveland favored by 10.5 on the road. 207 total in that one. Golden State at Orlando. Orlando favored by 4.5 at home. 217.5 point total there. Brooklyn at Washington, 3.5 point total, 3.5 point spread in Brooklyn's favor at Washington, 221 point total. Clippers at Philly, Clippers favored by 6.5 on the road, 215 total. Knicks at Toronto. Knicks favored by 13.5 on the road. Maybe getting some minutes from Mitch Robinson tonight. A little comeback before the playoffs. 211.5 for the Knicks in Toronto. See what Jonte Porter's friends are where they're putting their money down on that game. Portland at Atlanta. Atlanta favored by 10.5 at home. 217-point total. Indy at Chicago. Indy favored by 3 on the road. The only really juicy total on the slate at 235. We don't have anything above that. We don't have anything in the 240s. We don't have another game in the 230s. We don't even have another game over 225. Next highest. Oh, no, excuse me. We do. The Houston and OKC game is at 226.5 now. So that's the next highest after the 235 between Indy and Chicago. That game's also, the point spread's fairly close. So if we're looking for just competitive pieces with two teams with, kind of a range of players from stars down through the mid-range to cheap guys who produce a lot in limited minutes like TJ McConnell. So there's probably some pieces and parts going to come out of that Indy-Chicago game. Detroit at Minnesota. Minnesota favored by 15.5 at home. Detroit is a total mess. 216.5 point total in that one. Houston at OKC. This one came down. It's now a 5-point spread in OKC's favor. They're still favored, but SGA is out. So the point spread, point spread dropped by, I think it was 6.5 earlier, and it went down to 5. And then I believe that the total was above 230. I think it would drop by like 3.5, 4 points in the total, down to 226.5 on that SGA news. And then rounding things out, Lakers at Memphis. Lakers favored by 4.5 on the road. Should have AD and LeBron in. 223-point total there. Ugly slate. And then there's the injury report. Ducking threes here. Let's get this easy dub today. I like it. I like the attitude. Easy is not in my vocabulary right now when it comes to NBA. More on the coverage side than the lineup building side. Just checking the news real quick before I run through these injuries. Looks like nothing new has come out. And this is why it's not all that easy these days with covering everything. We have one probable on the entire slate out of 20 teams. Marcus Sasser, he's the only probable. A couple guys already, declared available, and they're not in the report because I don't want to make it just ungodly long. Questionables. Cam Thomas, Max Strus, Trace Jackson Davis, Jonathan Kuminga, Caleb Houston, Kelly Oubre Jr., Alec Burks, Mitch Robinson, DeAndre Ayton, Matisse Thybulle, DeJounte Murray, Cade Cunningham, couple biggies there, Jaden Ivey, Anthony Edwards is a biggie, Rudy Gobert's another biggie, TJ McConnell, Aaron Nesmith, Alex Caruso, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, all biggies there, Brendan Clark, Keldon Johnson, and Victor Wembanyama, as big as it possibly gets. And then the players who we already know are out. This one's a little longer. Keita Bates-Diop, Cam Johnson, Ben Simmons, Dennis Smith Jr., Justin Champagnie, not Julian Champagnie, Justin Champagnie, Bilal Coulibaly, Tyus Jones, Eugene Omoruyi, Landry Shamet, Donovan Mitchell, Dean Wade, Leaky Black, Marcus Bolden, Seth Curry, Cody Martin, Mark Williams, Gary Harris, Robert Covington, Joel Embiid, DeAnthony Melton, Terquavian Smith, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Chris Boucher, DJ Carton, Jakob Poeltl, Jonte Porter, Emmanuel Quickley, Malcolm Brogdon, Shaedon Sharp, Anthony Simon, Sadiq Bey, Mohamed Gouye, not Mohamedou Gouye, Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, Trey Young, Simone Fontecchio, Taj Gibson, Quentin Grimes, Isaiah Stewart, Aja Thompson, Stanley Amude, Karl Anthony Towns, Steven Adams, Tari Eason, Alperen Sengun, Cam Whitmore, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Benedict Mathurin, Julian Phillips, Patrick Williams, Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt, Christian Wood, Luke Kennard, John Conchar, who's doubtful, Yuta Watanabe, Vince Williams Jr., who's doubtful, Zaire Williams, Jordan Clarkson, and Chris Dunn. Easy dub. So yeah, that leaves us with a board with certain by DK win rate at the very least. Couple of big pieces coming out of OKC at the top of the board there with Josh Giddey and Jalen Williams. Like both of those options. Good defensive team. Houston's been very good lately. Underdog sent out a little tweet about it earlier. Per Underdog's tweet, just that I noticed as I was scanning for the news just a minute ago, Rockets this month, I assume that means the month of March, first in win percentage, second in offensive rating, fourth in defensive rating, second in net rating. One game out of the play-in now. So like I've been saying, they're a respectable defensive team. So there is a little bit of that threatening the value at the very top of the board here for Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams, but with no SGA. there is reason to believe in the upside for success for these two guys. They're a 111 and 108 performer over the course of the season anyway. Got them, just to start us off with some clicking around. I've got them a little bit higher than that. I gave Giddy got up to about 117. And then Jalen is in the 1-2 territory, which maybe is a little bit high. But he's accelerated. I don't remember. Oh, wait. I don't need to remember because I noted it, dummy. 1.18 was the season-long number in this situation. So I think there's a little upside there beyond the 1.08, obviously. And then I think there's a little bit of additional juice. So I like the spot for Jalen. Chet Holmgren's got to be somewhere on here. There he is. Chet showing through a little bit stronger on the DraftKings side for only 7,500. On FanDuel at 81, single bite at the apple at center. You still got him 11% of the time against a 6% win rate, but not the strongest overall play. Cason Wallace landing here fairly strongly on both sites. So a lot coming out of OKC. Wallace at just 4,000, floated up the board by, actually on both sides, he looks really strong. Stronger on FanDuel, actually, at the 4,300 mark. 24.9% win rate at 4,000 on DraftKings, with a 19% exposure in the top 150 at both guard spots for $4,000. At 4,300 at both guard spots on FanDuel, we got him 40% of the time in winning lineups, 52% of the time in our top 150. It's a big bite. That's second highest exposure. That might be the second highest overall FanDuel exposure in our top 150. It's a price-driven value play, but I do have him out to 28 minutes tonight. It's been at 0.73 per minute overall on the season, just 12.5% usage. 0.86 is the mark for this situation, so a little bit of an upgrade there. So I think there's a little good reason to believe in some Cason Wallace, especially at price. Doesn't need to do that much beyond the median. He's not the most popular player in our top 150 on FanDuel, though. That honor goes to, once again, Mr. Bruno Fernando, coming out of Atlanta. Obviously, still a bunch of missing pieces and parts for Atlanta. Bruno pushing his way up to, in just 22 minutes. Somebody asked the other day when he was looking really good if I had him starting by accident or something. No, that's 22 minutes. Guy's just a good per-minute performer. So in 22 minutes, 4,800 power forward and center only on FanDuel. We got him 64.6% of the time in winners and 80% of the time in our top 150. Does this completely change if a few of those many questionable players don't play and some other values emerge around it? Absolutely. Could be totally different by the beginning of the slate. Bruno is still going to be a valuable individual, though. Even if things come down, like I don't expect his projection or his minutes expectation or anything about that to change. So even if his percentages come down, even if you see his like public ownership crash a little bit, he's going to maintain that individual value. So it is definitely something where you can keep him in your pocket if the shape of the slate changes and still throw him into lineups. But right now he's looking like a piece of very good chalk on the FanDuel side. And then on DraftKings, we got him at nearly a 30% win rate in winners, 4,400 center only, and he landed in 50% of our top 150. Got some heavy concentration on DraftKings, though. 70% Josh Giddey, 66% Jalen Williams, and then 74% Cole Anthony, who's only at 4,400. What's his public ownership? He is quite popular, but we are obviously way ahead. Our win rate here is way ahead on Cole Anthony as well. Let me pull up that situation real quick. Might give him a bit of a haircut in the next update. Got him at 1.05. That's the territory he's been in. Golden State, reasonably good defensively. They pick up like almost 3 possessions in this game. I might give him a minor like Either take away a minute or two and give it to somebody else, or maybe just give him a little tiny, tiny rate haircut. I've got him like right where he's been over the past couple of months. Put a little flag on that. Because even if I dip him, we're still going to get a ton of them in this spot where we want it. This is definitely heavy. But I think you can get there fairly aggressively. The field is like half of what this win rate is, even less than that. So there's plenty of room to grab any shares of Cole Anthony that you want. I just don't know that he necessarily needs to be quite as strong as he looks here. It's probably like 2 points high on the projection. Just flagging that real quick. Keep an eye on that one in the update. Your Throwbacks is here. What's going on, buddy? Trey's here, tuning in on the drive home from work. Like picturing Trey like dialing it in on his on like an old-fashioned radio with the knobs and everything. Find my frequency. What's up, Phil? Phil Stills here. So yeah, Bruno, I definitely am going to leave basically where he is. We got him 50% of the time, so there's a lot of weight in these guys. I think the Bruno one is currently fairly appropriate given the price and given the potential upside. The Jalen and the Josh Giddey, I have total faith in. You can come down a little bit if you wanted to go like, around half of your available lineups, but they're both very, very popular. You'd only be 10-ish points clear of the field at most if you go 50% on these two guys, bring them down to about the win rates. Win rates are slightly higher than their projected popularity publicly, but the public is closing in on these win rates for both these players. So I think it does pay to be, more in this kind of a territory across 150 lineups. Cole Anthony, like I said, will come down, but you could probably book him still, even if he does 40-50% of the time, and you're still fairly aggressively ahead of the field. You're doubling up the field at least. Bruno, again, fire away. And then we get into some of these other type guys. Dante DiVincenzo set a Knicks record. I think it was 11 threes in his last game. Put up a 54 on the FanDuel scale in 40.8 minutes. As we always talk about with any number of these Knicks, a lot of them benefit from extreme minutes. A lot of them benefit from the days where their shots happen to fall, which is true of everybody, I guess, but more to the point for some of these Knicks. Like a good example of that is Deuce McBride. Deuce McBride has been playing 40-plus minutes a night over the most recent stretch. He played 43-3 the other night, but he's still well below a fantasy point per minute. Only 28 FanDuel points in that 43 minutes. So if he's not hitting a couple of shots, he's not a high-usage guy. He's a little bit higher usage than some of these types, some of the Case and Wallaces of the world in normal situations. And he's not afraid to take a three, and he can make some threes. But on the days where they don't shoot the lights out or shoot better than their average days, there is a little bit of a dip and an artificial cap on their ceiling. Hart is another one. 40 minutes, 42.8 FanDuel points. It's perfectly fine. It's around a point per minute. It's a little better than a point per minute, rather. At 7,800, though, there's not that much more room for Hart's production to grow. He can get you to 50 if he has, those 10 point, 10 rebound type of days, but he needs to pad his production in everything else with a little bit of scoring. On the nights that he does, he's a little bit more successful. Right here, this is, it's pushing that's an average performance for the price he's at now kind of level. It's not slate breaking by any means in either direction. It's not going to cost you the slate. If you book 42 for your 7,800, that's perfectly fine. You just need a couple more additional points out of whatever star at 11,000 or whatever scrub at 3,600 you've got in your lineup. But Hart's on the board for a ton of minutes. Got him coming right back with 40-plus minutes for both McBride and Hart. We do have the injection of Mitch Robinson for the Knicks. I expect if he plays, he's currently questionable. If he plays mid-teensy kind of minutes, and it probably just takes away from Jericho Sims. Not that we were playing Jericho Sims. I think there's still a little bit on the board for Precious. We'll see how he simmed out. In terms of minutes, there's still a little bit there. And then I think Hartenstein gets his usual complement of mid-20s minutes and looks like he normally looks. But the Mitch thing's going to be a wild card. If we get OG and Julius Randle back, the whole shape of the Knicks could change in the next couple of weeks, depending on who makes it back. Bogdan, along with DeJounte Murray, benefiting still from the absence of Trae Young, as well as numerous other parts, Saddiq Bey and Jalen Johnson, and so on and so forth. So tons and tons of upside for those guys. DeJounte Murray has been absolutely crushing expectations lately. Over the past, where did I go back to? Like, I think the beginning of February, with no Trae, and then the best representation of this situation I could create, it's been around 1.44. I've got him near that level going up against Portland. I don't really see all that much threat there, so I put him at 1.40. I didn't take him all the way up to the top. But I love the spot for Murray coming back in this one. He put up a 55.5 in 40 minutes the other night. If he doesn't play, because he's also questionable, I assume there's additional meat on the bone for Bogdan, who already looks pretty good. Bogdan currently coming in at 33.5, 31.3 on FanDuel, 26.2 and 23% of our top 150 on DraftKings. So he looks like a critical piece anyway. I'll have to check the rate situation, how that changes if there's no DeJounte Murray. And then you've got the oddball pieces, the Vic Krejcis of the world. I'm just thinking in terms of if minutes drop down the board. I've already got Garrison Matthews at 21, Wesley Matthews at 17. This is an ugly, ugly group if we lose DeJounte Murray. I'd have to see what the starting lineup looks like at that point, honestly, to really say exactly where those minutes are going to go and how. But that would take 38 minutes and throw them into the pool for Atlanta on a lot of low-end guys. All right, that's what we're currently looking at. So if we lose this and basically have to distribute it across these guys, I'll see who else is maybe sitting healthy on the bench. But that becomes ugly and it becomes cheap, so it creates a lot of salary-based value. You lose by far the most expensive player on that team, even if we're talking about Bogdan in that situation, who already, again, looks really good. Or obviously Bruno. God forbid I give Bruno another 2 minutes. He would get to 100%. But yeah, if we lose DeJounte out of that one, that could get awfully interesting in Atlanta. So that's one to keep an eye on. Alan Marga's here. On time, he says. Not late. I was late today. Crazy for Gordon Hayward or just somewhat crazy? How do you go about prioritizing all this data into your lines if you were hand building? How many Thunder is too much in one lineup on FanDuel? Let's see. All right. How do you prioritize all this data into your lines if you were hand building? I still, when I hand build, and that's what I've been doing over the last couple of weeks for basketball, like I've told you guys a couple times, I've just been throwing one lineup in. I've been done with basketball. I usually punch out in like February around President's Day, around the All-Star break, and just kind of coast through the rest of the season. This year I've been playing a lineup every day just to make sure I'm on top of things. But when I do hand build for these slates, I still do use an optimizer. I dash off, I put in the projections, I dash off the top pure optimal lineups, and then I dash off some with some randomization to create a little bit of a shakeup, but just a couple, just like 10 of each, just to get the top end of it. The randomization I might run a couple times until I've got a set that I like. I'll drop those into a sim. I'll let AceMind, our sim partners, acemind.io, I'll let them create out a sim that has the 50,000 entries, 50,000 lineups, 40,000, 20,000, whatever it is. And then I'll see how the pure optimals, the lineups that I had the optimizer build, came through the slate. And then I'll start looking at comparable lineups that came through the sim that might have overperformed those. If those lineups didn't do well at all, obviously there's some problems and we need to make some changes. But the point of all that is what I'm looking for there, and what you can take out of this data as well, is I'm looking for those key pieces of success, those key pieces of good chalk that are identified by the high win rates, right? Like looking at Bruno Fernando as an example, right? 65% win, 80% of our top 150. Like that is the sim saying that this guy is a good piece for value tonight. So you just use it to indicate a few of the building blocks. And then I think the best way to do it is like grab building block guys and then see what fits around them, right? You can go to, if you wanted to start a lineup, let's say Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams, Bruno Fernando. You could start with that 3-man, Maybe you throw Cason Wallace into that as well just because he's so cheap. So it gives you another piece of value, and now you're probably in the 6 and change per position level to spend on the rest of your guys. So then I go and I'll grab a star. I'll grab Anthony Davis. If he's playing, I'll grab DeJounte Murray and see how that impacts the lineup. I'll move DeJounte Murray from point guard to shooting guard, see what that makes available. And I'm always changing things around. I'll save the line. Like if I get to a build that I like, save that and then start playing with it, right? I've got, all right, that left 100 on the table. What happens if I take DeJounte Murray out of point guard, replace that shooting guard value guy that I don't really like with DeJounte Murray at shooting guard, and now I've got, does that 100 buy me anything in that point guard spot that he was previously filling? Oh, it does. There's a little upgrade there so that the cheap point guard I'm getting for 45, let's say, I like better than the $4,400 shooting guard or the $4,300 shooting guard. I take Cason Wallace out and I get 200 more somehow, from that change. So I'm always exploring the different combinations, the different positions. And then if you have access to sim tools, I sim and I resim and I resim, and I take the best performing lineups and I run them again and I make some changes, and I'll leave those and then I'll make a new row in my input to the sim. That's all right. I took this one and I combined it with what I already had. So I've got, 3 guys that I liked from that lineup that were creating value in a lot of other good performing lineups, but weren't necessarily in the one that came out this time from the top level of the sim. And I'll just interchange those parts, and then I'll drop that one into the sim along with all those other ones. I'll see how it performs. That's what got me to a lineup that I absolutely loved yesterday that did not cash. So there's obviously no guarantees. But the lineup that I ended up getting to yesterday was one that didn't appear in any of the optimizers, didn't appear. It had all the different components, but I never found it purely in an optimizer. It was one that I just landed on putting it together. And the one that I ended up putting together every time I simmed it through overperformed all the ones that came out of the optimizer and so on and so forth. So I really liked it. And that's always my goal. Find one that I didn't get to from just the machine mashing parts together. And that's why I actually I've rediscovered that I really enjoy building just one lineup. It's a lot more fun than just slapping, throwing the spreadsheet together, copy pasting 150 in and firing it off. It obviously limits your potential to win the tournament. There's that aspect of it. It's not the correct way to go about it necessarily, but I think it's a lot more fun, and I actually get to use my head instead of just, I get to use my head in conjunction with the numbers, not instead of the numbers. So I really like it. But that's how I go about building one lineup. I hope any of that made sense to you. Gray, how many Thunder is too much Thunder in one lineup on FanDuel? Let's see. I'm pulling up AceMind, acemind.io. I always run these with 4 so that we have that answer handy. It looks like there's a couple in here at the top of our top 150 with 4, but primarily there's still 2 and 3. We're obviously starting with Giddey and Jalen. That's who we want in most of these. The top overall lineup has both of them and Lou Dort in it. It's a 3-man OKC, 2-man Atlanta. It's got Clint Capella and Bruno Fernando together. I don't necessarily love that, but situationally, if they lose DeJounte, I think there are probably a couple additional minutes just spreading time around with a lot of limited spots. Maybe you see a couple additional minutes for Bruno, but I don't love the combination of those two. The next one down also has Bruno and Clint Capella in it. That one's got just Jalen and Josh Giddey. We'll look at these a little later. It's also got DeJounte Murray in it. But a lot of these are multiple Atlanta guys, multiple OKC guys. A couple with some Minnesota dudes trickling in, some Orlando around the edges. But yeah, I think you've got a viable path to success with 4, but it's probably 3. Yeah, Alan nails it. It's why I enjoy 1 to 3 lineups. It's the brain exercise. Also with baseball, I love doing that with baseball because you change out, you do that same concept. Let me swap this for that. And if you change a pitcher, all right, now I'm not just looking at one position. Does that get me to an entirely different stack that I couldn't get to before? Got a really good pitcher value for you guys for tomorrow. No guarantees. I'm not even saying he's a really good pitcher, but he's cheap. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Speaking of baseball, I have my placeholder in. Thought today was Thursday. I've also got my placeholder in, but I built one using that cheap pitcher that I'm talking about, that I'm referring to, just to see what you can get to with him, and you can get to basically anything that you want. But now it had Acuna as a one-off, and it lost Acuna, so I'll have to rebuild it, and that's the highest priced player. But obviously, baseball, we have no issues. Remember, no issues leaving money on the table in baseball. Stack, pitcher. If you use a one-off, so be it. If you're using a one-off, it's obviously more valuable to actually spend your salary. But especially if you're going 4-4, or FanDuel 4-4, or DraftKings 5-3. If you're going that route, you do not have to spend all your salary. If you go to a very cheap pitcher like that, though, it's the same. If you create a big bubble of salary, you might as well spend it. I'm not saying target not spending all your salary, but it's totally fine if you don't. Baseball, not basketball. Basketball, spend every dime if you can, as long as it's on an upgrade. I'm just going to keep going through this. I don't even know if we're going to go position by position. Why don't we just keep on going through some of these top end things? Does that make sense? Do you guys care? You know what? Screw it. Let's go. Let's cut the positions. We'll go backward again. Let's go centers first. Bruno, we talked about already. Trending Watford. He's 3,200 on DraftKings, so I guess we're getting him a little bit price-based there. That said, I don't totally love that one. He did put up 23.4 in just 20 minutes the other night. I've got him back to his usual 16. Actually, his usual is like 11. They're missing a bunch of pieces in Brooklyn, though. Yeah, at price on DraftKings, you can see how it impacts on FanDuel at 4,400. There is no impact. He's not relevant to the FanDuel slate at all. At 32 on DraftKings, even with that low-end minutes expectation, around a point per minute, yeah, you need more than this 16. You need more than a point per minute, but if he gets you 20 plus, you're probably okay for that price. 23.4% winner, just 16% of the top 150. I'd be concerned if we were seeing him in like this kind of trajectory, even if he was in the mid 20s, the high 20s, I'd be a little more concerned. This is just scraps. This is just using him as a lever to get up to combinations of high end players. Capella, 14.9% winner, just 8% of the top 150 on DraftKings, but he was coming up a lot, as I was just talking about on FanDuel. 22.6% winner, 36% of the top 150 for 6,700, center only. Easily the highest owned center on FanDuel, it looks like. Including the power forward center, guys. It's kind of surprising. 26 minutes projected. He's been playing 25-ish, 25, 26 a night, 1.22 for the season. Did put up 37.9 in 29 minutes in the last game. Over the recent stretch for them, he's been playing at a 1.37 level, which is a big uptick over his season-long production, obviously. So he's looked really good. Got him approaching that kind of a territory. I just don't love the him and Fernando together part of it. That's the only thing I would be really concerned with here. Otherwise, he does for 6,700. He looks like a perfectly fine FanDuel play. He's playable on DraftKings, but nowhere near as high a priority. The ownership is strong to quite strong on both sites. Field's way over where we're at on DraftKings. They're also well over the win rate on DraftKings. Makes him look like a lower end play. Again, I do think he's playable, but we got to him 8% of the time because the field is above what our win rate for him is. So 8-10% maybe. That'd be about the cutoff, I think. On FanDuel, we're ahead of the field. The field is slightly above our win rate, but we got to Clint Capella more than the field did. So if nothing else, you can come down to around the field's number if you want to cut shares of Capella for some reason. But he does look like a fairly strong piece and a reasonably good piece of popularity. Anthony Davis put up a monster last night, 78.6 in 51.9 minutes. Jeez, I didn't realize he played that much. Obviously, that's a ton of time for him to get where he needed to go, but he got there. We've got him back. He's been playing around a 1. He's a 1.51 for the season. Over the last couple of months, it's in, I think, 1.55, I want to say. And LeBron in the 1.4s. Nope, I'm wrong. 1.51 on the nose. And then LeBron 1.41. So I put them both right at their season rates going up against this Grizzlies team. AD looks pretty damn good on DraftKings at 14.4% win. We only got him 8.6% of the time. It's a little bit under the field. I have no issues with that one, though. The field's between these two numbers. So if you want to take that 8-9% and make it 12 to 15%, you're perfectly fine. No issues there. He's not looking quite as good on FanDuel. 11.7 is a pretty steep price to pay for him. 0.67% of the top 150 and a 5.9% win rate. Gives us... Well, he's not at all popular. We're technically below the field with our 0.67. But we're not that far below the field. So easy enough to get above the field. He does have that 5.9% win rate. If you want to use that as kind of a benchmark, take him up to 5-6%, maybe even 8%. Again, it's AD, so you're not making a tragic mistake by doing that on any given slate. You are costing yourself opportunity to spend some of that salary on like 3 other guys and just move 3 positions up from $4,000, $5,000 guys to $5,000, $6,000 guys. So that's the downstream effect that AD has. But his upside, his true ceiling is obvious in his monster per minute production, the number he put up just last night. Plenty for AD. Nick Claxton looks better on DraftKings, 12.7% winner, 18% of the top 150. And then Chet, a 12% winner and 19% of the top 150. 6,400 for Claxton, 7,500 for Chet. I like both options. Claxton is... When it's the same slate, just list the games in the same order. Why is that so difficult? We're around the field, it looks like, on Claxton on FanDuel, and then on DraftKings, also around the field. Feels like right in this kind of territory. Given that his win rate is a little bit below that, I have no issues if you want to come down 12-15%, be a little bit below the field, closer tucked into our win rate there. But he looks very, very playable. And then Chet, we're just getting to a ton of OKC, obviously. Chet plays 30.1 per game over their 71 games. Oh, 71 games. It's only 11 to go. So excited. He played 33.5 the other night, put up 37.8 on the FanDuel scale. I can tell you for sure that was not a winner because I had him. But an okay performance from him. We've seen higher end games from him than that. Very limited Houston team on the other side in terms of the big men that are available. So Chet should be able to, out of everybody from that side, he's not facing a killer defensive matchup. So I don't mind the spot for Chet. I think there's a little upside there at 81. Came through 11% of the time in the top 150 on FanDuel at a 6.8% win rate. That puts us right with the field on Chet as well. So we're with the field on both of these guys, basically. And then on DraftKings, probably the same thing. Yep. We are actually a couple points ahead of the field. It's very, very close, though. Call it with the field. But if you wanted to get 20% at Chet, you're fine there. It's roughly that already. He is another one, though, where the win rate is lower than our exposure. And our exposure is, and the field's exposure, rather, is between the two. So if you wanted to get under the field on Chet for whatever reason, there's room to do that as well. So both of those guys, very playable, tangible ceiling, tangible upside. The field is there, or at least there at the levels that our top 150 exposure got to. So I don't want to go and grab more of them. I'm comfy being at the field on those two guys. Chet Holmgren, Nick Claxton. And if you want to go below the field to grab more shares of other guys, that is an option with those two. I know sometimes I bounce around, so I like to try and summarize the gibberish. Richaun Holmes, 28 minutes projected. Not really hitting the board because he's 6,200 now on FanDuel. Center only. At 4,700, he's hitting the board fairly hard on DraftKings. A lot of upside there. 0.94 per minute over the course of the season. I think we're still below that. We had that recent run of games where he wasn't performing at the crazy high level that some might have expected when he stepped into this role. He's been at 0.98 over the last month and change, replicating this scenario. So it's right about, actually, where did I give him today? 0.94 is what I gave him today. Brooklyn, not that bad on the defensive side. It's just price driven on DraftKings and nothing else at 4,700. It's just a really good price. Booking the per minute upside, you can see the points per dollar there at 5.49 is one of the higher ones among all center eligible players. Is that second highest? Looks like second highest among all center eligible players on DraftKings. So there's some reasonable upside to be expected from Richaun Holmes here. Come on, click the right thing. We get a little bit more of them than the field. Field's in this territory. We grabbed a little bit more. And it's an interesting potential pivot given that these win rates are, we all know the difference between 12.75% and 10.68% is not all that great, even across 50,000 sims. So the fact that those came up very, very similar and these all came up very, very similar, but this is very different than these two. If you do make that decision to, all right, I'm going to build 150 lineups. I'm going to have some Claxton. I'm going to have some Chet. But I want to be below the field, so I'll book them right around 12%, get to that win rate or so. Richaun Holmes as a pay down is not a bad alternative because he's going to be less popular than these guys who are also pay downs. These guys are stronger alternatives in terms of the just, pure per minute upside, the especially for Bruno, and then the price-based upside of a Trendon Watford. But Richaun Holmes qualifies for all of that at 4,700. So definitely a guy to keep in mind if you are looking to click away from a Claxton share or a Chet Holmgren share. Even if you're building one, those are similar. So that's one of those spots that I was talking about that I would explore. All right, I've got a lineup that came through the Sims, that came through the optimizer, and it looks good. And it uses Chet Holmgren in there at the center spot. But it's also given me... I don't know. Yeah, let's use poor Case and Wallace again as the example. It's also given me Case and Wallace in that spot. And I don't really trust Case and Wallace's actual trajectory to the upside. I think he's going to land with a good game right around the median score. And this is just in the hypothetical, right? This is an actual analysis. In the hypothetical, I want to see, can I get something much better in that spot by taking a minor downgrade in that center spot, right? Because again, if you had Chet at 7.5, 12% winner, there is not a lot of daylight between 12.08 and 10.68, and you're saving a ton of money, right? So that 2,800 can do you a lot of good in that shooting guard spot. Now you're upgrading that shooting guard spot. So that's one that I would, you go through, you put the lineup in, save. Now let's take Chet out. Let's pop Richaun Holmes in and let's start clicking things around. So maybe I move DeJounte Murray from point guard to shooting guard, fill that role with DeJounte Murray, and now I've got money to spend on another pricey point guard. So just see how those things come together, That's the fun of this. That's the fun of this that you don't really get with the spreadsheet approach, with the just copy paste 150 in, drop them in, simmed out the best. Yeah, that's the best approach to winning. It's not necessarily the best approach to fun. Where were we? Jonathan Isaac, his usual role is who he is, kind of a spot for Isaac. He's only 4,000 again on DraftKings, power forward and center eligible, a 7.3% winner and 4% of the top 150 over there. You can see the cut line is pretty visible here on DK, by the way. We dropped pretty precipitously from a 10.68% win rate for Holmes down to the 7s, the 6s, and then the nothings awfully fast. For a 10-game slate, too, this is fairly concentrated up at the top here. FanDuel, there's probably a few more guys because you're booking two of the power forwards, and there's some power forwards on here. Isaac is a good per minute performer, 1.12 per minute on the season. Going up against Golden State, there's nothing to be gained really from that matchup. If you guys are shouting at me that somebody's been ruled out, by the way, I'll take care of it in a second. I'll jump back into the chat in just a second. Isaac's been playing at a monster 1.41 over the last couple of weeks. I've just got him at 1.15 or 1.41 in this situation. Actually, there's no real key missing parts. So his per minute rates have been out of his mind. I've just got him at 1.15 today, which is below his season long number by a little bit, and he still looks pretty good on DraftKings. And again, that's a tempered pretty good. He looks like the 8th best center eligible player, but at single digit exposures. Rudy Gobert, 34 minutes at 7,900, looks fairly playable on FanDuel, 11% win, 12% exposure in our top 150. His compatriot Naz Reid, 9% win, 6% of our top 150. Either one of those guys, but not necessarily both of them together in a lineup, looks pretty darn good to me. If we do lose Anthony Edwards, just on the virtue of more to do, maybe there's a little bit of uptick for Naz. Push him up to like 30 minutes just as I distribute around the surplus of minutes, and then maybe a little tiny uptick in usage. I'll have to check what the rate looks like. Gobert probably stays around the same level because not a high-end offensive player anyway. But he looks very playable. Again, on FanDuel, a little bit more so. 7%, 5% for him on DraftKings. Him and Naz are a lot closer together on DraftKings. 5.3% exposure in the top 150 to both of them. Naz only 6,800 at power forward center. Poku hitting the board. Where's our guy, Allen? Just a 5.5% win and a 3.3% exposure, but he's there. 20 minutes, 3,700, power forward and center eligible. 0.85 for the season, if I remember correctly. It's been approaching 1, though, in the recent run. And he's not on OKC, so I need to click on Charlotte. There we go. Poku has been exactly at 1 since like mid-February. Still not the most action, the largest sample by any means. But he's been at 1.0. I've got him just at 0.92, kind of splitting the difference. And he's coming through. Again, it's conservative. It's a little bit, but there's a little tiny sliver of value there at 37. If he was on a slate without, these two guys, without this guy, without that guy, he would probably look a little bit stronger. He'd be the guy I'd be talking about up here as like, well, that's price driven, but I believe in the per minute upside, blah, blah, blah. I think it's fairly realistic to expect median +4, somewhere around there. Not at all relevant on the FanDuel slate at 46, even with multi-position. Hartenstein, like I said, still maintained. I have him at 24 minutes. He plays 25 a night over the course of the season. Played 24 the other day, put up 37.5 FanDuel points at 1.06 for the season. He is a very good player for 25 minutes a night. You ask him to do more than that, and the leg starts to hurt. With Mitch coming back, I do, like I said, think that just kind of comes out of Jericho Sims, who I cut down to 4 minutes. I wanted to give him a little something because I don't think that Mitch is going to get any kind of full run. I got Mitch just at 12, and he's not relevant. Where Mitch is relevant is probably cutting down some Precious Achiuwa. Precious drops from the 26th that he played the other day, and he's been upwards of 30, and for a while he was playing 40. He averaged, including the time in Toronto, 22.8 for the season. I've got him at 18. You could easily say that this is more like, hey, Mitch, get out there for a quick 4-minute stint in the first quarter and in the third quarter, and that's going to be it. We just want to get you a little bit of game run, and Precious goes back up into the 20, 22-minute range. I don't think that makes all that much difference, considering how low he is here. Even at 49 on DraftKings, I don't think there's anything, unless if Mitch doesn't play, that changes. Precious goes back to his normal scenario. Jericho gains back his minutes. But Hartenstein's the guy that is holding up at least a little bit. 5% winner, 2.6% of the top 150 on DraftKings. Nothing on FanDuel. Differentiated guys, DeAndre Ayton, Jared Allen. More so Jared Allen with that 13.5% win with his power forward eligibility at 83. I prefer him to Ayton, coming up in 8% win rate, 10.6% of the top 150. If I'm going, well, I have to include a center in my FanDuel lineup. So it's single center. I think I want somebody with a little bit more reasonable upside. Ayton's been playing well. I don't want to take that away from him when he plays. 1.25 in limited action over the last couple of months. So there's an uptick from the season long mark for sure. I gave him the 1.25 today, and this is where he lands. You could definitely make an argument that he shouldn't even be this high. So for all those reasons, I'm out on DeAndre Ayton, as they say on Shark Tank. Brendan Clark, questionable to play. Might be back, I think, for the first time all season. Pretty sure. I've just got him at 14 minutes. I do not expect much. He's 3,000 on the DraftKings slate, which is the only reason he even got the 2.2%. I don't think that even that is all that realistic. Probably doesn't even end up playing. But he is sitting there at the dead min. Center only, though. There's not really much help there. Definitely don't have much esteem for that spot until we start giving him some realistic minutes again. And then Allen, just on his own, going up against Charlotte, should be a very good spot for him. Got him just 4.6% of the time against that 13.5% win rate. I assume that means he's a little bit popular. Actually not. He's in the single digits. High single digits, but he's in the single digits. So the field is below our win rate. I have no issues taking that up to 10, 12. Even 15 is not completely out of the question. It's an easy spot for him to succeed. Allen has been playing at a 1.11 over the last couple of months. That's exactly what I gave him today. And he still succeeds. He's been a 1.17 for the season. So there's a little bit of unappreciated, unaccounted for upside in beyond what he's done here. So I like him on FanDuel. Probably end up with him at power forward if I'm playing him. Not sure I get to him, but he's at least reasonable. A couple other outliers. Kelly O, 9% winner, 8% of the top 150 on FanDuel. Plenty for Kelly O to do. Still missing everybody from Toronto. Just not a good matchup against the Knicks by any stretch of the imagination. Nick Richards, 7.9% winner, 6% of the top 150 for 57. I don't love the idea of throwing him into that Cleveland front court. So this is one that's very, very tempered expectations. Probably would not go to it in one lineup. None of these guys are relevant on DraftKings. That's why we're only talking on the FanDuel side. Zubac, just 3.4%. Rui, back to his usual roll, 1.5%. Nothing to speak of there. Time to move on to forwards. I will jump back into the chat, see what you guys are talking about. Yeah, Alan, that's not a crazy thing to expect. A late Lakers scratch by someone due to OT. Wouldn't totally shock me. Dennis giving away my cheap pitcher. Yeah, it could go really wrong. But that pitcher that I was mentioning obliquely is Garrett Crochet, the opening day starter from the White Sox. Potentially a sneaky high on lefty. I like the fact that he's a lefty. A couple of the Tigers' best hitters are lefties, so that helps. Potentially high strikeout, but also potentially disastrously high walk rate. But he's very, very cheap, like significantly cheaper than anybody else on the slate. And no, my friend, I am stacking the Reds against Josiah in that spot. Love the Cincinnati Reds tomorrow. Did I close? I closed it. Like 4 of the top 8-ish guys on the home run model are from Cincinnati. Don't do this. Don't get me talking about baseball. We got too much basketball to cover. Let's see what's going on in the old news here. 541 shit. I gotta hit the upside here. Hit the speed. Hit the gas pedal. That's the word I'm looking for. I read Cam Thomas won't have a minutes limit in a tweet as I was saying that, and the word upside slipped out of my mouth. I would assume Moon now listed as probable. Trace Jackson Davis available. Kuminga is out for Golden State. Caleb Houston's available. Magic will start Fultz, Suggs, Franz Wagner, Banchero, and Wendell Carter. Let me just see what that does to my Orlando minutes real quick. Suggs, Bolts. So everything I said about Cole Anthony before, I'll have to double check, but I'm definitely going to take a couple minutes away from him and probably just hand him to Markelle Fultz. I don't know if it's going to be a direct role reversal with rates and how it mass out. I might just put them even. But I had Anthony at 26, Markelle Fultz at 18, Jalen Suggs at 30, which is typical. I'll double check the recent combinations when they go that route, but probably takes away anything from that Cole Anthony play that we were talking about already not liking earlier. So just cross him off then, as Rachel Phelps from Major League says. This guy here is dead. And then Golden State side of that same game. So we lose Kuminga, but we have TJD confirmed. I had TJD at 24 minutes. Kuminga at 31 in his typical role. Might be a direct swap of like 8 of those minutes down to TJD to get him into the 30s. Wiggins will pick up a couple of surplus minutes. Draymond might pick up like 1 or 2 surplus minutes as I spread them out. And then we'll probably get Looney back on the court. Looney played 19 last night. I didn't project him for minutes today, but I would expect we will go back that direction. Probably not going to be overly relevant, but the most relevant guy, I think the most relevant impact will be additional run for TJD, and then whatever minor upticks for the established guys that are already out there. Kenneth Woodhouse, how am I feeling about Jackson Hayes? We'll find him on this list somewhere. Doesn't look like he came up all that strong. 12 minutes. No real expectations. Played 16-9 in the OT game and put up 3.8 FanDuel points. I feel like we've got a lot of better guys in that price tier right now. Do we have a reason that we're asking that, Ken? Just expecting guys from the Lakers to sit, or where'd that pop up? I'm curious. I'm perfectly willing to say that I might have missed something. What was it? Somebody else asked about an individual there. Alan asked about Gordon Hayward. Hayward also not coming up all that strong. 18 minutes, usual kind of in his who he is spot. Played 10 the other day, put up a donut. Yeah, it's another one where I just feel like on both sites you've got better options. 3,800 both forward spots. Like if you're looking to do that, just go to one of these guys. A lot of similar, like 32 for Trendon Watford. I already said I don't like that much. 4,000 for Cason Wallace I think is viable in comparable range. 44 for Cole Anthony comes down from here. Keep that one in mind. That one comes down. 34 for Isaiah Joe. Oof, man, some of these are thin. But Gordon Hayward looks thinner right now. I would need to find Gordon Hayward like 10 more minutes, I think, to make him at all respectable here. Yeah, Ken, that would be a situation where it would only be if we get news like that for one of those guys. And then Ken Woodhouse was answering me, if you're not looking at the chat, saying that his reason for the Jackson Hayes question is a good one. It would be if AD sits. AD and LeBron both are questionable for this one. I think, did we get confirmation that LeBron's playing? I feel like I saw that somewhere. AD questionable. I have them both listed as questionable on the site. For some reason, I feel like just before the show, something popped in front of me that said LeBron was going to go. But either way, if one of those guys doesn't play, then yeah, you've got some impact. This was the situation last night when LeBron didn't go and we had OT. It's 290. Yeah, that's right. So, your additional spot, I think first you get a little bit of additional run for Taurean Prince. We saw him play 28 last night, and as predicted, he put up a total disaster with just 12 points. Fortunately, we got away from that play quite a bit as the last hour before lock was going on. So hopefully, again, whatever we talk about on these shows, treat somewhat loosely and make sure that you're getting the most recent updates at like 6:45, 6:55, because some things do change. But Torian Prince came down pretty quickly early. Then I ended up taking a few minutes away on top of that. So he dipped way below where he was during the show yesterday. Then went out, played 28 minutes, put up 12 fantasy points. Another guy that I talked about not liking at all yesterday was Spencer Dinwiddie. He went up slightly, but I still didn't have him anywhere near a strong play. He went out, played 42.2 minutes last night, put up 17.4 FanDuel points. That is terrible. That's below like the 0.5 and change that he's been putting up recently. So that's why I had him as low as I did yesterday. That's why I'm right back to having Spencer Dinwiddie pretty low today. But if we get one or both of the key stars off the court, there will be an expectation for Dinwiddie to go back to 30 plus minutes, a little bit of additional usage, if nothing else, that would support the idea of some additional upside. Rui would be a key piece. Austin Reeves would be key. D'Lo obviously shoots to the roof. He put up 60 in 50 minutes last night. So it's all of those different components, I think, before I get to Jackson Hayes. But yes, there would be an uptick for Jackson Hayes for sure, given those minutes. The price at $4,500, I don't know how that necessarily bounces off the Bruno Fernandos of the slate. Because even if you give Hayes, give him 12 more minutes, put him at 24, give him 26. I don't know that we're getting all that much on top of where those other guys are already at for the price. So it's a real gamble. You're only getting it if one of these two is ruled out. And even then, I don't know that I really go there all that strongly. Played almost 17 last night, put up 3.8 FanDuel points. That's a disaster. Obviously, he's more capable than that. The two guys that I wouldn't necessarily want, who will probably at least get scrap surplus minutes, but maybe not even because they only played 6.9 and 7.4 in an OT game with no LeBron last night. But Cam Reddish, Max Christie, both pretty low-end performers. So I don't know if there's anything that can rescue them out of outside of an oddball Cam Reddish is starting today kind of a spot. But yeah, as we go down the board, Jackson Hayes would get more interesting than these two, but probably less than some of those. Ken's loving the Twins tomorrow. I like the Twins all season. Got a sneaky, interesting lineup. Tracing coming out. Yeah, we got that one. Let's keep on rolling. It's almost 6. Jeez. All right. Let's look for some key guys on this because we haven't really talked many of some of the non-center forwards, and we still got all the guards. Yikes. Anthony Edwards, if he plays, at worst and is who he is kind of a spot, nearly a 17% win rate and 20% exposure in our top 150 going up against a nothing Detroit team that will not be able to stop him from doing anything that he wants out there. He's been at 1.23 for the season, a monster 31.6% usage rate. Plenty of upside for Anthony Edwards. We just need the Ant-Man to take the court today. On DraftKings, looks even stronger, 22% win rate, 18% of the top 150. Fire away on the shares if he's active. No issues with it whatsoever. Should be a pushover spot for them. Pascal Siakam looking pretty decent. 27% exposure on FanDuel, 19.5% win rate, 23.8% win rate, and 30% exposure on the DraftKings slate. Reasonable amount of upside. Again, that Indy Chicago game is the highest overall total by a decent margin. It's also one of the closer point spreads. A 3-point spread and a 235-point total puts it 8.5 points ahead of the next highest game. And it puts it as one of the closer, more competitive games overall. So Siakam looks pretty decent there. Alex Caruso landing pretty hard on the FanDuel side. A little bit less so, but definitely relevant for 5,700 on the DraftKings slate. On FanDuel, 27% win, 28% exposure, 19% and 17% on DraftKings. DeAndre Hunter, another piece coming out of Atlanta, both forward spots on both sites, 5,900 on both sites. That puts him a little bit higher on the FanDuel board against the higher cap, 34.04% win, 28% of our top 150. 19% win and 13% of the top 150 on DraftKings. And another guy that will benefit just from more shots available if DeJounte Murray doesn't go. So I don't know that we'll go much more over his 34 minutes, but there should be a rate uptick if we don't get DeJounte, and he already looks pretty solid. Lou Dort, easy piece to get to with plenty of minutes from OKC. 4,900 small forward shooting guard on FanDuel, 28%, 26%. On DraftKings, he's a small forward only. Doesn't really matter for his value. 4,600 hits the board nicely. 20% across the board, basically. OKC again. 3 or 4 of those guys. 2 at a minimum, I think, is probably the right approach. It is a good defensive team on both sides of that game, really. Houston, OKC's defense cutting into Houston, and then Houston's defense could certainly cut into some of these individuals, like a Lou Dort, not the best offensive player in the world. Could go out and easily have one of these games where he played a full 32 and a half, put up 14.7 FanDuel points. He's a 0.73 per minute performer, 14.8% usage under normal circumstances. But again, major shakeup with no SGA. Josh Hart, I talked about a little bit before. At 7,800, he's still very, very functional. 24% win, 30% exposure in the top 150. 15% basically across the board on DraftKings for 76, both forward spots. As long as he's below 8,000, it seems like it keeps working. So below 8,000 and 40 minutes, we're still okay for Josh Hart, but he continues to come with all of those ongoing asterisks about needs to hit a couple of shots or grab an abundance of rebounds. Needs to see a little minor uptick in usage because he's not a high usage guy, but keeps on getting it done, and Tibbs is just going to run him into the ground. Him and Deuce McBride playing 40 minutes plus. Is it for 5 straight games now? Let's see. Outside of that, 12. So over the last 4, Deuce has averaged 45.5 out of 48 minutes play. That's insane. Absolutely insane. And Josh Hart, over the last 5, has averaged 41.4. Bananas. Devo has also been at 41 in the last 2, by the way. McBride is expendable. Tibbs loves him. Kid's a really good defender. Good on-ball defender. Capable of shooting. Can knock down threes. What's he shooting from 3 for the season? He's not a forward. Shooting 40.6% from 3. He only takes 3 a game. That's where your issues come from. Taking 3.4 a game, making 1.4, but shooting 40%. What I don't have is the recent run, like over these 40-minute games, how many threes is he taking? I expect there's an uptick there just by virtue of being on the court more lately. But they've also got him signed for a sweetheart of a contract over the next couple of years. They extended him at a really cheap price. I forget what the numbers are. But they locked him in before this big step forward that he's seen this season. I think before the Quickly trade. They locked in Deuce for a very cheap contract, and he's overperforming it right now. So I don't think Tibbs wants to actually murder him. I don't think that he considers him actually truly expendable. I know you're kidding. But yeah, he's actually kind of a critical go-forward component for them right now. So I love the player. For DFS purposes, he comes with that big caution, just like Josh Hart does, maybe even to a greater extent. You get a lot of these, and 28 points for 5,900, for 5,600, it's not where you need to be. So he does come with that downside of just not a high volume shooter in a lot of ways, but does a lot on the court and plays a lot of minutes. So you can drag him over the line. And at worst on a lot of these, with guys that play, again, 40-ish minutes, you do have some kind of security that they're going to land at least in the range of like their median projections. Just by virtue of being out there so much. The ball falls into their hands a couple times when you're playing the entire game. Who else? Scoot, back to playing full minutes, 11.9% win, 18% of the top 150 on FanDuel, 16.3% and 20% exposure on the top 150 on DraftKings. Actually, it looks like a reasonable play. No real... Let's see what we got. 1.04 in limited action over the recent last month and change. And I have him at 0.98 today. David Soto, those should sort fairly similarly. The top ROI, the top average cash winner, and the top win percent should all be fairly similar. The top win percent can get bogged down where you get like a bunch of lineups since it rounds up that are like, 0.08. You get like a couple like, 0.14, 0.12, 0.1, 0.9, and then there's like 5 of them that are like, 0.09. There's like 5 of them at that, and then there's like 30 of them at 0.08. So given how the decimals work, I don't typically use the win rate, but those typically do jibe across back and forth. Where I use the win rate a decent amount is if I'm hand building one lineup and I'm just selecting those individuals, I'll go to that player tab, kind of like what we're looking at here, or I could just use this and I'll sort by win rate and I'll make some decisions around those guys. And I'll look at the win rate against how much did they come up in the top 150 in that sim, and it just helps inform those decisions. But typically when we look at the lineups, they're sorted by either ROI or average cash won, which should come up the same or very similar. All right, so Scoot, I have under what he's been doing for the season and for his recent run. Or no, excuse me, over what he's been doing for the season by a little bit, under what he's been doing over his recent run. And he looks very playable at worst from the mid-range, 6,400 FanDuel, 6,100 DraftKings. Lot of playable wing types here. Caruso we talked about. Franz Wagner, 17.9% on FanDuel, 12.6% for just 6,900. That's a reasonable price. Small forward, power forward eligible. 1.05 per minute on the season, 25% usage. On DraftKings at 64, only one of the forward spots, 16.2% win, and just 11% of the top 150. Probably puts him a little under the field. And it's not loaded up, so we will move on from that question. Let me reload that page. I'm just going to try and find a few key guys here to talk about, and because got to fire up the guards and rocket through the end of the show. Hart we talked about. Suggs looked good already, and nothing will change for Suggs. Suggs is going to stay about where he is. But look very good. 30% win, 36% of the top 150 on FanDuel, at 5,300 on DraftKings, 15%, and got to him 23% of the time. So getting to him a little ahead of that win rate. Even if the field is between these two numbers, I think you can keep some of them, or keep him at this 20+ exposure. Cam Thomas. No minutes restriction. Didn't have him in a minutes restriction, but it's nice to have that confirmation. 24.17% win, 30.6% of our top 150 on FanDuel because he's only 73 with shooting guard and small forward eligibility over there. A nice piece, but entirely scoring dependent, as we've talked about before. Cam needs to score his real life points to provide any kind of fantasy value. When he does, he's a very high usage guy. He's still a strong per minute performer, 1.0 on the nose for the season. And when he does get his buckets, you see some pretty nice, juicy fantasy scores out of him. So I don't mind the Cam Thomas play at all on FanDuel. On DraftKings, it's more is who he is type situation. 13.4% win, but we did get him a little bit. 26% of our top 150. And that's nicely ahead of the field. A little bit more than doubling up the field there. If you want to go 20%, you're perfectly fine. So a good chunk of Cam Thomas on both sides. DeRozan definitely just is who he is type of a situation for DeMar. 12.5% win. Did get him 22% of the time on FanDuel. Another piece out of that Indy-Chicago game, which again, just keep that in mind. If you end up, all right, I got that last spot to fill. Who should I check out, see if he fits, see how it looks with him in? A guy like DeRozan coming out of that the Chicago side of that game, going up against a bad defensive team, picking up some possessions against Indy, a high-octane game with the biggest overall point total. It's a guy to keep in mind. For sure. Tyrese Halliburton is a guy to keep in mind from that. DeRozan put up 53.4 in 37.8 minutes. This is around a ceiling game for DeMar, but for 8,600, 8,400, that's a pretty good performance. Chet, we've talked about. Holmes, we've talked about. Denny, pulling a 21% win, but just 7% exposure on FanDuel, 9% and 6% on DraftKings. Denny's owned double that or so on the DraftKings slate. higher than our win rate, which we don't like. On the FanDuel slate, Denny's similar situation. He's owned right around our win rate and significantly higher, 3 times basically, than our exposure. So I think that's a good play. You have some 10% max, let's call it, on both sites. And probably on DraftKings, it's more like 5-6%. Jordan Poole continues to be nobody's favorite, but he is definitely playing better over this recent run with all the missing parts. Just a 9% win rate, 7% of the top 150. If I'm building out 150 lineups, I can have Jordan Poole around 10% and have no issues. If I'm building one lineup, he's probably not in it. Not a priority on FanDuel, not a priority on DraftKings. Essentially the same play across sites. Vic Krejci. Coming through at 4,200 on FanDuel, 17.3% win, 14.6% of the top 150. On DraftKings at just 42, he's point guard, shooting guard over there versus small forward on FanDuel. It's having an impact. I guess the price against the lower cap and then the positioning are both impacting him a little bit here. 7% win, just 2% of the top 150. Already at 33 minutes, he's been getting starts. Played 37 minutes Played 33 minutes the last time out, put up 26 FanDuel points. That's a reasonable chunk of production for the price on both sites. If you get that game again, you're pretty happy with it here. I think there is a little bit of potential upward trajectory too if we lose to DeJounte Murray. So another guy to keep in mind from the Atlanta side. Gobert we talked about. Nas we've talked about. Darius Garland, again, pushover opponent for Cleveland here. But we've just been getting Darius Garland like we continue to talk about, performing right around his 0.95 to 1.0 kind of territory with no uptick despite all those missing pieces, despite no Donovan Mitchell in an ongoing sense. We really haven't seen the big ceiling games from Darius Garland. So I think it's just an is who he is spot. 12.9, 15%. It's perfectly fine getting to him around 15% of the time on FanDuel. On DraftKings, just a 6.9% win and 4% exposure. Not nearly a critical play on DK. So we like him better on FanDuel, but not really a priority on either site. Wouldn't shock me by any means if Darius Garland went up, put up 50-plus FanDuel points, won the slate for somebody at that price. But he just has not been doing that. Brandon Miller, I like as a player, but going up against Cleveland on this slate on FanDuel has no joy for him. 0% of our top 150 and a 1% win rate. On DraftKings, we got him at least 4% in the top 150. He's got a 6.2% win rate, but not nearly a priority either. And that goes for most of these guys that I'm going to talk about in the next minute or two. So looking at some of these FanDuel outliers, Javon Freeman, Liberty with 28 minutes to play. Everybody's still missing for Toronto. Plenty of upside. Just don't like the spot at all for basically anybody from Toronto going up against the Knicks. 9.7% win, 11% of the top 150. Toronto very likely to be held under 100 real life overall points today. But Freeman Liberty's got some ability. 25.8 in 29.3. Puts him well above that season-long mark. But not a priority on either site. A little bit of rate-based love on FanDuel, but not a priority. 7% win for Scottie Pippen Jr. in that messy Memphis situation. Miles Bridges, 7.5%. Got to them both a little bit less than that. Similar situations for both of those guys across on DraftKings. They're both very playable, just in similar situations to what they've been. Nothing special about either spot. Micic, also going up against Cleveland. Also don't really love it. Mass out okay for the price. Just not a ton of ceiling on it. 30.7. He also had a messy game there. 8.4 FanDuel points. He's had a couple of these too, where we've been on him. But no real need to get to him today. Minor play on either site, but not a priority. LeBron, assuming LeBron plays, 6.2% win, but we got him 17% of the time on FanDuel. 4.7% win, got him 8% of the time on DraftKings. I'm guessing he's just not popular. That is definitely true on FanDuel. And it is also true on DraftKings. LeBron in the low single digits for public popularity today. All we need is LeBron to take the court and you get an advantage on him with the public not going to him at all. I don't know that you necessarily need to go to like 15% against the 6% win rate, but if you're even at 8%, 10% exposure to LeBron, you're way ahead of the field. Been at 1.40, 1.41 over the last recent stretch of games, 1.37 FanDuel for the season. It's 1.41 since mid-Feb. LeBron is still LeBron. I have no issues going to it at 10-1 when he sims out so far ahead of the field. Jalen is just priced pretty appropriately at 95. Very playable, 3.6%, just 2% exposure, 4.6%, 2% exposure on DraftKings. Paolo Banchero, a little bit of an outlier across sites, 14.08% win, 7% exposure for 8,600 both forward spots on FanDuel. On DraftKings, didn't really get to him. Banchero's got tangible upside. I just don't know how far beyond this we get ceiling game going up against Golden State. 1.15 for the minute just feels like a conventional spot. No real situational gain for Paolo here. So I think it's fair to call it an is who he is situation, but mathed out okay. Jared Allen we've talked about. Dennis Schroeder I don't really like. Schroeder didn't come up at all in top 150. None of these guys did. 4% win on both sites, but didn't come up in the top 150. He's getting expensive on DraftKings too at 63. Just don't love Schroeder. Delano Banton. I know that I referred to him, but we didn't hit him all that hard the other day with Portland still missing pieces. It was Grant out and Brogdon and so on and so forth. Went out, played nearly 39 minutes, put up nearly 55 FanDuel points on that one. If he gets anywhere near that kind of upside again for 6,600, definitely works out. Right now at 28 minutes, we're not there. But if we see an uptick in minutes, if you see these projections go over 30, put it that way, you could probably put a couple shares of Delano Banton in your pocket. 609, gotta hurry. Otherwise, the projections won't have time to get updated. GG Jackson, minor play on FanDuel, not really that much of a priority on DraftKings. Kobe White, not really a priority on either site. Good player, good game environment. I like Kobe a little bit better than these are indicating. I'm not saying go out there and throw 20% of Kobe White in your lineups, but you could probably have him a little bit more than zero. There's just some raw ability there at 7,500 point guard only. That said, he's getting squeezed by a lot of other plays at that spot. So you probably don't need to do it. But if you're the biggest Kobe White fan in the world and you've got his jersey hanging in your closet and everything, then sure, go ahead and you can throw in your one Kobe White share. Karis LeVert, no thank you on either site. Is who he is type situation for LeVert. Kawhi, not really coming through. Is who he is. Maxey, same story. 5% Jaden McDaniels. 5% win rate for Jaden came up less than that. 4% win rate for Ayo came up less than that. Another player from Indy, Chicago that I wouldn't mind having a couple shares of, but doesn't look like a priority compared to everybody else from that game or any of these other games. Okoro, 3%, 4% on FanDuel. Zubac, 3%, nothing. 7% of Nick Richards we talked about already. Grady Dick, 4.6%, just 1.3% of our top 150 on FanDuel for 4,900. Shooting guard and small forward eligible. Again, just don't like the matchup against New York. No homerism in that. They're just a good defensive team. That's about it. Agbaji's in that same situation for Toronto. He's been playing really well lately, in a per minute sense anyway, but don't really love it. He's cheap, 5,000, but he's not as cheap as he was. Boy, this just keeps on going. Kelly O, 9.7%, 8% of the top 150. Again, same situation going up against the Knicks, and especially going up against the Knicks front court. Not going to be a lot of boards available for Kelly O today. That said, if he's just sitting outside a little bit and shooting, maybe he succeeds. Let's take a quick look at Ace Mind. Looks like we lost DeAndre Ayton. So things open back up for Portland. Probably have Duop Reith step into the starting lineup. Recent news. Yep, Duop Reith is in the starting lineup. Blazers will start Scoot, Ryan Rupert, Murray, Kamara, and Reith. Matty Thybulle's out. Jeremy Grant confirmed out. DeAndre Ayton out. Kelly Oubre now a game time decision. Joel Embiid, a very good chance to return before the playoffs. That's good news. So the biggest change that we've had in the last couple of minutes is no Ayton, it looks like. Real quick look at our pals over at Ace Mind. Ducking, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Fading OKC if you only make one lineup. At least take one of the high-end guys. If you're only making one lineup, you don't trust Case and Wallace with low per minute, low usage, totally fine. Totally get it. You don't trust Lou Dort, low usage, low minutes, even at the price. Totally get it. Throw a Josh Giddey in there. Throw a Jalen Williams in there. Even if you're just taking one of them. You don't necessarily need to take them together, but both of those guys have significant paths to success tonight. They are going up against a good man-for-man Houston defense, like we've talked about. But when they're showing that much value, I don't typically get behind the idea of just blanket, I'm just not going to play those guys because other people are and because they look good. I get what you're going for, right? The idea of being contrarian, the idea of zig when they zag and all of that. But that has for years been way overblown in the community, and especially with basketball, and especially when we're talking about good chalk. And then especially on top of that, when we're talking about good players who are a good chalk. So both Giddey and Jalen Williams are just good players in a vacuum. Well over a point per minute for the salary. It's appropriate. Even in a non-upgraded situation, they would have been decent plays today. So when you get the good players in that kind of a spot, that's when you really don't want to just blanket fade. If it was just the value guys and you're like, yeah, I don't trust any of those value guys. I've got other value guys that I can go to on the board that are comparable. Totally agree. Or totally much more comfortable with that. But I would definitely at least consider a Giddey or a Jalen Williams, if not the value guys. So all the sims and all the data that you've been looking at has been brought to us by our pals over at acemind.io. Taking our projections and some ownership from another site, and we drop them in here and we run 50,000 sims. The boys have sims for PGA, college basketball, NBA, MMA, NFL when it's in season, and I'm telling you for sure, right up here, within the next 24 hours, baseball is going to be there. The other good news, we have a promo code going with these guys now. So if you go over there, if you're considering signing up, not only do you get your first 3 days for free, so you can get the first couple of days of baseball season for free if you sign up today, tomorrow. But if you use the promo code rotoscouts, all caps rotoscouts, just like it sounds, just like you can see it on the screen there, gives you 20% off of your first month after that free trial. So you get 3 free days, then 20% off your first month with promo code rotoscouts over at acemind.io. They've also got an optimizer for all those different sports. So you can optimize lineups. You can also optimize, and with no exporting, just a couple of clicks, move those optimized lineups into my sim. See how what you optimized comes out in the sim. Really, really slick site. And as I've said before, what I like best about it, these guys are on the ball for customer support. You run into any kind of questions, issues like that, jump into their Discord, and they fix things like that. Good little site. All right, so let's talk about Cole Anthony. That play comes way down. I already was going to take it down, and now knowing what the starting lineup looks like and going to probably take a couple minutes away from him, I do not have that much love for the Cole Anthony play. We're seeing plenty of Case and Wallace as a value guy. That one's still on the board, one of the value guys from OKC. But like we talked about, make sure that you're getting this one's got a Jalen and a Giddey in it. Right? You get something like this. Maybe you replace the Cole Anthony play with something. Deuce is fine. Anthony Edwards, high end. Jalen Williams, high end. Bruno is a good per minute one. Josh Giddey, one of our higher end plays of the day. I don't know that we're getting Aaron Wiggins in there. And then DeJounte. So we've got a lot of Starsy Scrubsy lineups on our hands, I think. It is a ton of OKC. Right? Look at how many of these OKC. 2, 3, 4. Most of these have 2 or 3 OKC guys in them. A lot of Atlanta also hitting the board. Fair amount of DeJounte Murray. Good amount of Lou Dort also coming out of the OKC lineups. Cam Thomas is on this board a little bit. Looks like we were going basically like mid-range with a couple spend ups at point. Mostly mid-range with a couple spend downs for Case and Wallace at shooting guard. Straight through the mid-range with a little bit of upside to like an Anthony Edwards or DeMar DeRozan at the small forward. Taking a lot of value out of center with Bruno. Power forward, you do get Jalen in some of these, but that one's got like Trey Mann in the front end, Jalen and Case and Wallace. So it looks like power forward goes back and forth a little bit between value, depending on what you did in the guard spots. That's one of your flexy, probably shooting guard to power forward is one of your price flexes. Mostly cheap centers. You got a little room for Claxton, you got a little room for Rudy, but the Bruno Fernando play looks pretty solid there. Guard, it's just whatever you didn't use over here, drop it into here. Same with forward. But you do look like you have some spend, like the way these oriented, spent money at util, forward, and guard a little bit. Tell you, if you're a believer in that, in the Poku spot, Fallon's out there. That might be your lineup up top, Alan. Cole Anthony. No, we lose the Anthony play again. I keep forgetting that. But Cam Thomas, Lou Dort, Poku, Bruno, Giddey, Anthony Edwards, and DeJounte Murray. It's not bad. That also had $300 left on the table, so you could upgrade that Cole Anthony spot to something, I'm sure. That was pulling back $235 against the $18 buy-in, I believe, on DraftKings today. You can see, to go back to that question that was asked before about the sorting by win rate or by ROI or by average cash. You can see basically like the average cash line here, right? Just watch as the ROI one, right? Those are essentially the same. There's minor differences as you go further down the board a little bit, but your top performers are going to basically be the same, maybe in a slightly different order. But then if you go by win probability, you get this one at 0.17, 0.14, these two at 0.13, and then we got this big stretch of 0.11s into some 0.1s, a big stretch of 0.909s and 0.08s. Look how many 0.08s there are, 0.07s. So the ability to distinguish one of these lineups from another one is greatly diminished by the fact that they're all essentially the same in that regard. That's where maybe you could take a peek at the top 1% finisher to get a little bit of distinction. But I typically use the average cash and the ROI. Just cuts through the noise. Pull up FanDuel real quick. 620. A lot of Josh Giddey. Giddey in a mid-range, Giddey in a value. Looks like it's coming up a fair amount of the time. He's also shooting guard eligible, so we've got a similar thing here. It looks more spend when you're using Giddey at shooting guard. This one's got Cole Anthony. Well, we'll scratch that, but Alex Caruso, a reasonable play there. This one went Deuce and Freeman Liberty. A little head-to-head there with Giddey, Suggs, Anthony Edwards, Dort, Bruno Fernando, LeBron, and Rudy Gobert. Kind of an interesting one. Looks like we've got one of these power forward spots probably dedicated to Bruno. We are getting a lot of Bruno and Clint Capella together, but we've got a little room for, well, Ayton's not on the board anymore. That might create a little bit more room for Chet, honestly. We might see a little bit of an uptick for Chet. Maybe guys like Miles Turner hit the board a little bit more. It'll probably just land more Clint Capella in our lives. Plenty of room for good players on FanDuel, though. I would say we're taking one value at point guard, one value at shooting guard. Joker's laying on the wire for my keyboard and slowly pulling it off the desk. The microphone might go next. It's probably a good cue to wind the show down. Excuse me. So 1-1. Looks like you can get a reasonable double spend at the small forward, but a lot of them go 1-1 there as well. Mostly double value looking at power forward, unless you drop LeBron into one of those spots, but he's also got the small forward eligibility. A lot of Atlanta coming through in the forward spots in the center. And then like mid on center. Yeah, same deal, David. The top 1%. You do get more distinction in those top 1%. This is the player side. Just because obviously that's a bigger pool, so you can get a little bit more refined. But you still will run into that a little bit. A couple dupes there, a couple of 5.54. What's the true difference between 5.53 and 5.54? It gets a little debatable. And you can see, if you're going by that, right, this 5.53 compared to this 5.54 immediately above it. Well, when we look over to the average cash or the ROI lines, this one brought back 75 and this one brought back only 45, despite getting into the top 1%, 1/100th of a percent higher. So always something to bear in mind, and that's also shown in that win rate, right? 0.03 versus the 0.09, 0.08 for those other two. So you got to watch for those. It's important to consider all the different things. But for me, the most important is probably average cash, win rate, ROI, average cash go together. Either one of those is fine by me, and then win rate. No sweat, bud. Happy to do it. All right, let me end this show. This has gone too long. We will be back tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning for baseball. Can't wait. I'm planning on it probably being at 11 a.m. I'll get it announced nice and early tomorrow morning. If it doesn't get announced and scheduled tonight, subscribe on YouTube here if you haven't already so that you can get the notifications. Overnight tonight, we'll get a article of some sort, recommendations for the MLB slate. Player projections, hitter projections, home run mark in my home run model for every single player on the slate. Pitcher projections, home run picks, the individual home run picks, the power index where we show the team-oriented power upside. Whatever else I might come up with or forgot that I was doing last year, it'll all be up on the site for you for tomorrow morning. So check that out. For now, I got to go get some basketball stuff updated. Good luck out there tonight, gang. It's going to be pandemonium. Somebody go win something. I'll see you tomorrow.